all so young and innocent, and I think good-hearted. We did not question, though, the church's teachings. It was all men, young men in the seminary. At that time, there were hundreds. And I remember at the major seminary in Austin, we had women professors, PhDs in theology. But if one of them, just say wanted to be felt this call to be a priest, they, our teachers, professors, were not qualified. But back then, we didn't ask those questions. When we were ordained, we got our assignments, and I was assigned to serve the poor of Bolivia. And there was a whole, I had never been to Latin America. First stop, language school. I was the worst student ever to go through that language school in Cochabamba, Bolivia. When I spoke Spanish, they thought I was speaking some indigenous language. But really, I went into this barrio, the slum on the outskirts of La Paz, where I was assigned. And this became my home for the next 5 years. And it was here where the poor really became my teachers. As those in Vietnam began to teach me. It was here where the dispossessed, those who struggled for survival, who lived on the edge, who saw their children die before their time, began to teach me. And it saddened me to see my country in Bolivia supporting a brutal dictator, General Hugo Banzer, that came into power through a violent coup. And I had to make a decision early on when I arrived. Really, it became clear, am I going to be just a priest who said mass and baptized their babies and visited the sick, all very important things. But what I learned was that I was being invited to join their struggle. I learned that all-important word that has become so important in my life that Jim had mentioned, that word solidarity, solidaridad. So important in our journey, in our faith, to make the struggle of others our struggle, to walk with others in that struggle for peace, for justice, for equality. It's but an invitation, and we can say yes to that invitation or no. And I realized I wanted to be a part of that struggle. And really, it was in my 5th year that it led to my arrest. So many were being arrested. I was lucky, very fortunate. I was a U.S. citizen. I had a passport, U.S. citizen. And it wasn't in their best interest to torture or kill gringos. That would have hurt all that military aid being pumped into the military there. But so many were being arrested, tortured, some killed. I came home and it was a big adjustment. And then not long after getting back to the U.S., though, El Salvador came into the news. Archbishop Oscar Romero assassinated. A great bishop, can I say, he said, someone who spoke for the voiceless, the poor there. And Bishop Romero is so unique, very conservative at first, but he had a good heart listening to the people. He began to speak at the cathedral on their behalf. And he gave a sermon after many death threats. He would not stop defending the poor and criticizing U.S. foreign policy for all of its military aid, the military, the men with the guns, killing the poor. And March 23rd, 1989, he gave his last sermon at the cathedral, where he made this special plea to the men in the military to stop the killing, to lay down their weapons. said to the military, stop obeying your superior officers telling you to kill your fellow campesinos. And obey that higher law, that law of God that says, thou shalt not kill. And I mean, that really angered the military and that wealthy elite. And it was the next day, while saying Mass in a small church, he was assassinated. That made the headlines of so many papers around the world. And we were so moved here in the U.S. as we had been following Bishop Romero's journey. And, but just months later, Fort West Church went to Marino Sisters, Maura Clark and Anita Ford, and 2 members of the Ursuline community in Cleveland, Ohio, were raped and killed by the Salvadoran soldiers. I remember shortly after Bishop Romero was assassinated, the churchmen were killed. We learned that 525 soldiers had just arrived at Fort Benning, Georgia, to be trained in combat in the art of killing. So we went there, a rather large group, and 3 of us decided, after some discernment, to dress as high-ranking Army officers. And we went on to Fort Benning one night and dressed as these high-ranking officers, and we had a very powerful boombox, a tape player, with the last sermon of Bishop Romero that he gave in the cathedral to the military: stop the killing, lay down your weapons. And so we went on to the Fort Benning at night near the barracks where the Salvadorans were housed, scaled this tall pine tree. When the last lights went out, we just said, Bishop Romero, this is for you, brother. Pressed down that button, and his voice boomed into the barracks. It was really, I mean, it poked the beehive. They came out with their weapons, their guns, M16s, their German Shepherds and spotters in the tree, ordered us down, or they would shoot us down. And I must say, it was time to come down. We left the boombox up there with this message repeated over and over. We were, of course, brought to jail, the county jail, to trial, and then sent to prison for a year and a half. And I must say, Linda Ventimiglia, who was in our little group of 3, she was in the Army Reserves, came from a military family. Larry Rosebaum, an outright priest, from Chicago, and I, we had no regrets. It was a humble act of solidarity. I have to tell you, each of us did not have any regrets for that action. It actually was the best, it ended up being the best retreat I have ever been on. But we could not stop the killing. Shortly after getting out of prison, they went after the Jesuits in El Salvador. And if you remember that, the 6 Jesuits at the university, November the 16th, 1989. They were dragged out of their rooms with their co-worker, young mother Elba, and her 16-year-old daughter Selena. And they were shot at close range, massacred. This made the front pages of newspapers all over the world. And members of Congress, for the first time, were angry. Every year they would approve that military aid, $1 million a day from our tax money going to El Salvador. But now it was different. They knew some of the Jesuit priests. They sent a congressional task force. They come back reporting that those who did the killing were trained at the U.S. Army School of the Americas at Fort Benning, Georgia. And that's when I and a small group, 10 of us, Kathy Kelly, many of you might know Kathy, and Charlie Litke, recipient of the Medal of Honor in Vietnam, and a Jesuit priest, 2 Dominicans, 3 Salvadorans. And we started what we call the SOA Watch, just to do some basic research, investigating the school. And what we found was not complicated. We learned that this school had actually trained now over 50,000 soldiers from 20 countries throughout Latin America. It was hiding behind this wall of secrecy. And when we learned that those who killed Bishop Merrill, the churchwomen, the Jesuits, and the two women, and the list went on, were graduates of this school, that's when we realized we've got to come back and stay here and start up a group here, open up an office in Washington. I remain in Columbus, Georgia, right outside of the main gate of Fort Benning, where I continue to live. And we put the word out, set up our website, and invited people to come.